Hello and welcome to the very first edition of Community Connections with MFi. I'm your host, Evan Weisenfeld, and I'm here today with Dick Judge from the Kingsbury Pond Committee, who's here to talk to us today about the Kingsbury Pond Gristmill. Welcome, Dick.
Thank you, Evan. Good to be here.
Really happy to have you on our inaugural show. I'm really excited to learn more about the gristmill and all the great things that you guys have been doing there. As a way of background and introduction, maybe you can tell everybody a little bit about the Kingsbury Pond Gristmill and its history here in Medfield.
We're coming obviously online today. Would much rather be at the mill itself, but precluding the virus, getting rid of the virus, we're doing the best we can. So this is a photo of the mill behind me. That actually Medfield Foundation took and had been using and has donated to us at the gristmill for Medfield Day. A little bit of history of the mill. The first settlers that moved to Medfield, the mill was the most important building in town, secondary to the church, I should say. When they settled, milling grain was tedious and extremely labor intensive in regards to crushing the stones and so forth. So we recognized that early on as a country and protected the mills as best we could, although the native Indians knew that by burning down the mills, the settlers would disperse. So the mills were very much cherished and protected in the early days of the founding of the country. And this mill is no exception. Built early 1700s, if not late 1600s. We're still trying to date it. Richard de Sorga has done a fantastic job of identifying when he thought it was built. The only identifier of the 1600s, early 1700s, is a malting house. Now, most people may not know what that is, but any beer maker will tell you they know exactly what that is. So when when you malt barley and wheat for beer, you basically let it slough out on a floor and let it dry. After that, you crush it. And so, little known fact, the early mills in the United States made quite a bit of beer because beer was safe to drink. The river water, the lake water, maybe not so much as something that had been boiled like beer. Richard had found the malting house in the 1600s, but only found reference to the mill in the 1700s. So it's listed in his book in the 1700s, but we've had discussions where he's corrected it back now because we realized that the malt house was down behind the mill, behind the dam. And when I showed him where the malting house floor was, we all put it two and two together that they couldn't have built the malting house without building the dam, and they wouldn't build a dam without a mill. So it placed the mill 100 years earlier than Richard had thought it was, which makes sense in regards to how our forebears set up the town and set up manufacturing. This is early manufacturing. It moved from there, from family to family, and eventually the town bought it in the 80s, and a original mill committee was set up to look into rebuilding it and seeing if they could get it functioning again. We're talking hundreds of years here, so a lot of people, when they first come into the mill and see the inside of the mill, they're a little bit surprised. There's no electricity. There are no nails in the building. It's all wood peg. Put together with spikes of wood through mortise and tenon joints. That surprises them. It also surprises them how old even the addition to the mill. So the original mill was a fairly small building, and they put on an addition right near Route 27 in the 1800s, early 1800s. So even the new addition is 100 years old. So it gives you an idea how far back this whole thing goes in history.
Yeah, it's really amazing to have something with that kind of a history in our local community. we know that there are a few other structures that date back pretty far in the history of Medfield, but the grist mill, given the role that it played in supporting the local community way back then, it's really amazing to have that kind of living history. What inspired you to get involved in the grist mill?
I was a selectman down in Sandwich, Massachusetts, down the Cape. And we have a wonderful grist mill, operating grist mill down in downtown Sandwich. If you're ever through there on 6A, it's a wonderful place to stop. You can go home with a bag of cornmeal, and it's fantastic for putting under a pizza so the pizza doesn't burn, and or making cornbread. Just everything is fresh and great about it. It's a super addition for the town. It makes the whole town more valuable. It's a Currier and Ives town now. It's a town that's interested in preserving its history, but using that history to make a future for itself. And so Medfield deserves this mill because a lot of other mills around the US and around Massachusetts were actually patterned after this mill. To give you an idea how old it is, the Sturbridge, Massachusetts, the mill they have in Sturbridge that everybody goes to, Old Sturbridge, and says, ooh, ah, was patterned after this mill in Medfield. Because Sturbridge was once part of Medfield. The King of England, when I think it was Millis wanted to separate from Medfield, the people of Medfield wanted some kind of recourse to a payment for taking that land. So the king gave them a piece of property out in Western Massachusetts. It was called New Medfield. And then people from Medfield moved out there and eventually became Sturbridge.
I was not familiar with that story. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Medfield, if you think of an old town in Massachusetts, Medfield is older than that. It is very steeped in history, but it's also a history that you would miss in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
People have driven past this mill. Medfield residents, I would say 70% of Medfield residents have never been inside the mill. 50% don't even know it's there. And the ones that have been able to get inside are, I think, blown away. We used the mill for the third grade tours. When they kick back in after COVID, we'll kick back in. And the third graders are amazed to go into the mill, see that everything was operated by water only, and then realize that there's a waterfall inside the building, and to go downstairs and see the water pouring in from the pond in the inside of the building. So this building was built when the King of England was in charge. And one of the things he wanted to prevent was mills being built in the United States. The reason being, he wanted all the product grown in the United States to be shipped back to England. He knew if they established mills that they would be grinding wheat and barley for their own use. He didn't want that to happen. So he forbade any people involved with mills at all in England to emigrate to the United States. Well, what is now the United States. So the people that built this mill had to basically sign on the dotted line that they were plumbers or electricians or something else other than millers, because millers weren't allowed to come to the US. When they built the mill, it's built like an old ship. People are really surprised that they have to duck their head and that the beams are 4 feet wide by 4 feet wide. That was the engineering of the day. Bulk was the engineering. Now we have small steel beams that will carry the load. But back then they needed a huge, basically a tree at each point in the building.
I understand there's a really interesting story involving returnable bottle and can deposits in the grist mill. It's one of those things that, it's a town myth or legend. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And is that really a true story?
It's legend, but it's not a myth. It really happened. So the original committee, we have a lot to thank them for. They actually rebuilt the interior of the mill. Some of the major beams they replaced. And putting that together, they discovered two things. One, that the old wood wheel was destroyed and rotted away, and that they were replaced it 150 years ago with something called a turbine. And I'm getting to the nickels here pretty quick. So that original committee discovered the turbine, which is a water wheel on its side. It spins on its side instead of spinning like a water wheel. It spins on its side. The water comes in and spins it. It's much more efficient. They replaced all the wood water wheels with a turbine, which sounds new and efficient, but it was made out of wood and iron. The committee established and rebuilt a lot of the mill and got to a point where they obviously needed to raise some money. So one of the things they did was down at the transfer station, they had a bin for nickel returnables. And so that they established that some of the money would go to the gazebo downtown, but the grand scheme of things that was set aside for rebuilding this mill, this historic mill. Fast forward 40 years, I got involved. I figured out that it was a mill, that we could bring it back to life. I got a hold of the committee members that were alive. Barbara Layton was one of them. Mike told me about a fund that it was set up, that he thought there was about $1,500 in the fund downtown Medfield because they would collect these nickels. Once I reestablished a committee with the selectmen, I went down to town hall to see about this fund. The woman behind the desk, the accountant at the time, this is years ago, she said, "You're Dick Judge, and you're probably here for the fund that we have for the mill." And I said, "Yes, I understand there's about $1,500 in the account." And the whole room there started laughing. And I said, "Okay, $500. And they laughed even more. And she said, "No, you're going the wrong direction. And this account has never been touched in 20 years since it was set up." And I said, $2,000. And they all laughed again. And she said, "No, you're not understanding. It's a fund that's never been touched, that's been collecting compound interest. And a check has been dropped in there from the nickels, bottles, and cans every week for the last, 15 years at that point." I said, "Okay, $10,000, just to blow them away." And they all laughed again. And she said, "No, you're about halfway there." So there was $23,000 in the account from nickel returnable bottles that people in Medfield had just been tossing as a donation into a dumpster for many years. Now that we have single stream, that's not set up that way. We'd like to get it set up again because it was, as it turns out, after years of doing that, it really does make a difference, where a nickel can amount to a lot.
How did you guys use the money that was set aside? What have you done so far?
I'm a big advocate of not using the money. So
Okay.
we were very stingy because everything is donation with us. Everything's volunteer. 100% of everything goes into materials for the mill, and even the materials we try to get donated. But one thing that we couldn't get donated was a gentleman to build the new wheel and deliver it to us. The only one that was qualified was a guy down in Georgia. And so we negotiated with him, and for $9,000, we had a new cedar 10-foot water wheel delivered and put in place. And I have to tell you, the guy was unbelievable. A great guy, threw in all kinds of stuff, actually came up and delivered himself because he wanted to be part of this historic, putting a wheels that he had been building for years, actually on a building that deserved one, I guess, is what he would say.
Right.
Frankly, that's all we've spent. And we've tried to keep the accounts on a high note because we knew that we would be needing the money. And that's why we have another campaign because the next phase of the mill is going to be the most expensive, because it's things that we can't accomplish without some professional help. We are going to take that turbine that was rebuilt already and have a crane drop it through the floor into its future home down below the mill. So that when the water comes in, that underground waterfall, it will spin the turbine. The turbine will spin the shaft up to the mill stone. Now, there are 2 millstones that are still in the mill. People are just blown away when they go in. They say, "Oh my God, look at those." The stones were milled right here in Medfield by hand. They were cut out off of Granite Street. In fact, there's still some remnants of where they took some of the stones out up there. So these 2 stones weigh a couple tons apiece. The bottom stone stays stable and the top stone turns. You put the grain in the top. The grain gets pushed between the stones and gets crushed between the stones. First time around, you get a heavy grist. Second time around, you get more toward flour of putting it through. It's ground. It makes its way to the outside of the stone because the stone has carvings in it that pushes the grist to the outside of the stone. And by the time it gets to the outside of the stone, it's already been crushed between the stones about a dozen times, and is almost flour. And it falls down through a hole down into the basement into a collecting bin, where the farmer takes where he dropped off the corn upstairs off his wagon. He drives his wagon down behind the mill and picks up his sacks of flour or cornmeal or whatever he's asked the mill to produce for him. The project we are undertaking requires a new roof. So if anybody's out there who has any access to cedar shingles, we are looking for a donation or a good deal on cedar shingles. We're going to have to re-roof it. We're looking for any kind of a donation of a crane. Tree Tech was great with the lifting the mill wheel into place, the water wheel in place. So any companies that are out there that want to make a name for themselves, this is going to be a great project to get involved with, because we need to lift those stones up. We need to lift the turbine up. We need to drop it through the floor into the race, they call it. That's where the water races through the building, and then set the turbine up to turn the shafts and get the mill actually operating. And what our vision is as a committee is to turn it into a operating museum. And so people can come in and see the power of water and what it can do to produce anything you need as an alternate. And now we're talking about alternate source of energy. I mean, this is one of the original ones that we're going back to. It's hydropower, right? I want to help the kids envision that you can harness gravity. And by harnessing gravity, you've got the most powerful instrument out there to turn huge 2-ton stones, to turn sawmill blades, to cut massive trees. That's how our forebears did it, you know? So MFi is playing a huge part in our success with this. We've started a campaign to put money aside to pay for the incidentals that we'll have to do to get this whole project done. We've had a bunch of people step forward already, and I'm so grateful for whether it's $10, $100, or an estate grant. We are really beholden to them for that.
You referenced an estate grant. There's a great opportunity history that you have. You received a really meaningful donation from Barbara Layton, who was a longtime Medfield resident and a Medfield native, who left a gift in her will. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that works?
Sure. She made it really easy. I mean, she was almost 100 years old, but made it really easy for us. With her attorney, she bequeathed a percentage of her estate. She was an only child, but she was a force to be reckoned with in Medfield. I think she she shoveled her own driveway till she was 90. She was just a great person. And she was involved in a lot of different things in Medfield and protecting Medfield way back when, before it was sexy to talk about history. She was doing it. And in fact, she was involved with the mill. And there is a brick floor. The whole base of the mill has a brick floor in it. For hundreds of years, it had a dirt floor. And she was able to take apart an old fireplace there and build and lay out the bricks for the entire first floor of the building by herself. I mean, there were other people involved, obviously, in the mill committee, but that was her project. And so she had a real affinity for the mill. And that's what I want to develop with other people in town, to get them into the mill, to actually see that this isn't a Disneyland fantasy world. This actually exists. I had a young boy ask me a couple weeks ago if the cobwebs were real. Because I mean, when you get down into the mill, it's an old ship. I mean, it creaks and it has a lot of life to it. And he was just amazed that he was walking through something that was that old. Barbara made this. So after she passed, her attorney was in touch with us, and it just went off without a hitch. Her donation was well accepted. We would have accepted $10 from Barbara. I mean, just the fact that she was willing to, she thought of us was meant a lot to us. And so we're encouraging, if you're listening to this and thinking about how you're going to settle your estate, if you want to leave a lasting impression, this is one way to do it. We have, and you can leave it through MFi. You just access the MFi website, or call me, call somebody from MFi if you're not crazy about donating online. We're more than happy to talk you through and make sure that it's put in the right place. If you donate through MFi, mention the grist mill, right? It makes a difference. Then the foundation can seat the money for that, and we're appreciative of that. And would like other people to look at a lasting gift through their estate planning, whether it's for the grist mill or for other projects in town that Medfield Foundation supports. If you have a love in town, it leave a lasting legacy and leave a little something for that project and protection of that in Medfield. So.
That's really great, Dick. And we'll talk a little bit more at the end of the show about how people can do that, how to get in touch with the Medfield Foundation,
Right.
MFi, as we typically call it, MFi, as you call it. But we appreciate that. And, anybody that's able to make a donation, whether that's a small donation or a planned gift, it's something that will be put to good use. And we'll talk
Sure.
more about that. You mentioned somebody taking a tour. Is the grist mill open to the public? And how can people experience the property?
So I'm encouraging everyone to stop by the property. It's on Route 27, kitty corner from St. Edward's. If you're headed out of Medfield Center toward Walpole on Route 27, it's on the left-hand side on the Kingsbury Pond. You'll see a little red building at the end of the pond. It's much bigger than it looks from the street. And that's why so many people, I think, pass by and they go, okay, it's a small building. Pull in the driveway. You own it as Medfield residents. You own the property. It's yours to take care of. Local folks have been generous enough to allow us a turnaround up in the woods. When you pull into the property, it looks like you're confined. Not so. You drive right past the grist mill on the property and up into the woods. There's a big turnaround for your car, so you can turn around and park up there or park near the front of the mill. And then I encourage people to walk around the building and walk down behind the building. There are 2 rivers behind the building. There are a couple of bridges going over those rivers. One is the tail race where the water leaves the mill when it's operating. The other is an overflow stream. It's like a trout stream that runs to the side. And we've had Eagle Scout projects, Girl Scout projects, Scout projects, building bridges, building Adirondack chairs. A lot of people have contributed to the slice of paradise that people will see when they walk down behind the building. It's going to be an aha moment for them to realize that, wow, there's the street right there. I've been up and down 27 a million times, and I've never seen this area that's right off the street, right?
Yeah, many people drive by and they notice the building or they see the pond. People go fishing. I know you shared some photos recently of a family of otters that have been spending some time in the pond. There's
Yes.
some great photos on your Facebook page showing the otters on the ice and fishing, and really kind of an interesting experience there for the nature and wildlife.
Right. And I have to say, this year has been a breakthrough year for people visiting the mill. People who have said, you know what, I drive by here every day to go to work, back and forth to work, and I'm stopping in because, I noticed the geese on the pond, or I noticed this, or I noticed that. People are obviously much more excited to get outside now, especially with COVID and so forth. And we are glad to have them. And again, it's free. People say, well, what can I do? I say, if you really want, you can contribute money, obviously through MFi, and we'll get into that. Contribute your time if you want to help us out on the Gristmill Committee, or just come on one of the days where we do cleanup, where it's raking and rearranging and polishing the place up for visitors, or you want to stand as a sentinel, for a weekend of visitors to come in to see the place. We're all ears for people to volunteer. Everyone's busy, but everyone has either time, money, or materials. One of those 3 things.
Some links to the website and to
Right.
the Facebook page for those people that are interested in learning more or getting involved. For those who are interested in donating, the link is medfieldfoundation.org/give, and we will direct your donations, whether it's for the grist mill or any one of the other Medfield Foundation initiatives or programs that are being run, to the right organization. Of course, we're big fans of the grist mill and everything that they're doing. And we know that with the installation of the turbine and the maintenance and upkeep, and regardless of the fact that Dick doesn't want to spend the money in the nickel fund, we do need to raise funds to make sure that we can continue to support the building and bring it back to working order. I think that it would be a really amazing opportunity for our town to have a working mill. It would quickly become a tourist attraction. People would be able to mill their grain, and I think that we would probably have, for example, restaurants who would be interested in purchasing grain directly from the grist mill if we were to ever get into that. So it's something that could benefit our local restaurants and even beyond.
Yeah, and just one comment about that. Blue Moon has already said, I'll buy everything that you can make from that mill. He knows as a baker the difference between stone ground wheat and stone ground flour and machine ground. Now it's all steel ground. He says there's no comparison. The stone ground is so much better flavor, so much better for you. He goes on and on and on. And so it will be interesting to get this rocking and rolling. A lot of smart people in Medfield, and we're looking for engineers that need to rethink engineering, because a lot of the engineering that has gone into this mill has been lost. And so we have to reinvent the wheel, basically, to get this going again. So anyone who has any particular thing that they are either do part-time or do full-time that might feel they can contribute, we're more than happy to hear from them.
And we'll go ahead and make sure that we put up again the website link and an email address for people that are interested in getting involved. Dick, we've talked about how people can donate. We've talked about people can do with their time. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about or leave us with today?
We are going to need a couple things going into the spring. Our generator died last summer, so if anyone has an old generator they want to donate, we're more than happy to take it off your hands. Even to loan it to us would be happy. Material wise, again, the cedar shakes and any kind of roofing material things. But really, we're delighted at the community effort that's gone into it. When we have needed something, it always seems as though someone stops in and says, "Oh, I have a friend that can do that," or I know somebody who does that. I mean, everybody from Hurley Testa, they got involved early. Bob Piersack at Northern Plumbing was instrumental. So these are guys that are looking at a pile of wood and imagining an A-frame to put a wheel on, a water wheel, a 10-foot water wheel. Jerry Iannella said, "Oh, I've got a CAD system at home, so I'll do a CAD drawing of the wheel for you." And that's what we submitted to the town for our building permits and so forth. I have to tell you, the town as well has been absolutely unbelievably great in regards to bringing this back to life, bringing the mill back to life. The pond, the mill, and everything around it. And I can't thank the Department of Public Works and the town hall and everyone there enough.
Well, that's great. Dick, I really want to thank you for taking the time today to speak with us, to give us the history of the Kingsbury Pond Gristmill, your involvement with it, the great things that you've been doing with the funds that you've raised, and the time that people have contributed. It really is a treasure of the town of Medfield, and something everybody here should be proud of. People should definitely go by and visit on Route 27 in Medfield on the Kingsbury Pond. So Dick, thank you very much.
Thanks, Evan.
So that's the end of our first show today. I'd like to thank you, for those of you that joined us, for coming to the inaugural episode of Community Connections with Medfield Foundation. We're very excited. Going forward, we will be having shows that feature a variety of nonprofits in town. This is an opportunity for those groups that do great things for our local town and community to be able to present what they have going on, to help educate and inform the community, to provide some publicity, and really to just talk about the great things that are happening in our local community. As the Medfield Foundation, our mission is to build community and to make Medfield a great place to live and continue to be a great place to live. And it's through people like Dick Judge and the very generous volunteers who live in town who continue to do so on a daily basis. So on behalf of the Medfield Foundation, again, my name is Evan Weisenfeld, president of MFI. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in a future episode. Have a good night.